I'm not sure where the delay is gonna kick us in. But hey, everybody, welcome to this first foray into propellerhead talks, or something with a better name. We've got a bunch of people here from a bunch of different areas of the industry. We've got some questions that some people sent to us ahead of time. And we will jump through that, get through as many questions as we can. If you have any other questions, feel free to tack it along in the chat there at the side. Happy to kind of steer this wherever and leave it kind of open-ended and see what you're interested in hearing about. So I think really quickly, let's kind of jump through an introduction of everyone we have here on the panel. My name is Jackson Gallagher. I'm a designer at Fragment 9, doing primarily concert design, specializing in lighting and video more specifically. And let's turn over to Charles.
Hi, I'm Charles. I'm a media server programmer. I'm a freelancer based in Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Hank. I'm also a media server programmer based out of New York City.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a creative director at All of It Now. I do a lot of design and animation. Get on site once in a while now.
I'm Josh. I'm a freelance lighting programmer and media server programmer based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and a tremendous past in technical direction and production management and drafting.
I'm Andy Babin, based out of Lancaster, PA. I'm a screens programmer and systems integrator.
Hi, I'm Jess Kreger. I'm an associate lighting designer based in New York.
I'm Scott. I'm a lighting programmer based in New York.
And I'm Chrissy. I'm a designer with LightSwitch. I work out of the San Francisco office, and my background is with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Local 919 and 16. And my background is...
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And yeah, I think let's go ahead and kick it off. I think the first question, we had a couple different questions around, is getting started out as a freelancer. I think everything from the ins and outs of being organized as a freelancer to maybe more meta skills, like what is hireable, what skill set should people be looking for, and then especially any thoughts based on getting into the world now in the midst of the COVID crisis. So does anyone want to jump in specifically with any salient thoughts on that front?
Yeah, sure. Honestly, skill sets are incredibly transferable, and a lot of people will have very, very deep skill sets. I would say my biggest point of advice for anybody who wants to get into the freelancer side of things is be somebody who somebody enjoys working with. In all honesty, we all have to live how many hours a day, how many days per year, completely on top of each other, whether it's on corporate events or on tour buses or all over the world. We're in very close quarters. So whatever you want to learn, whatever you want to know, which everybody at this panel could go into depth about, I would say, number one, be someone you want to spend time with.
Yeah, I think that's the best point, and I don't think any of us can say it enough. As long as you're not a jerk and you're someone that's friendly, like I will hire the friendly, good personality person 10 times over than the someone who's really smart and is a cocky jerk about it. How about anyone else on that front?
Talk about more than just work. You know, we spend all this time together. And it's like, all right, we're going to a bar. Let's talk about the ice cream you made last week. Let's talk about literally anything else besides that number we just spent 8 hours queuing that has 2 queues in it. Like, doesn't matter. Literally anything else, any hobbies, like, be more than just the work.
And how about, how did everyone here get started out? What was the first thing that you did maybe in your first 6 months out of school? If you went to school, any big mistakes that you made? Like, I think for me, I kind of went down more of the video route before I got into design, and I went to intern on an off-Broadway show, and I did not bring my laptop to day one because I wasn't sure if that was going to be needed. So I think I learned pretty quickly that that was a big mistake, and I brought my laptop to every show ever since. But how about you guys? Any early on kind of new mistakes that you may have made?
I was an audio guy first. And actually I jokingly say that, but you know, to expand on that, I started out as an audio guy mixing monitors in a club. which obviously is very not theater, but I, took that experience into theater, which then made me realize lighting was way cooler, which led me to sit down in front of a console and learn to program. So, I mean, I definitely took not the straightest path, but also on the flip side, I know this is a more theatrical based thing, but I found my audio knowledge has greatly helped me expand in video.
And Andy, you're one of those people who's taken your depth of audio knowledge to build out some really cool, specifically audio reactive effects. Like Andy also has a separate YouTube page where he goes into depth on some things, and kind of using those knowledge from your background fields has been incredibly helpful to a lot of us. I think I started out actually as a assistant technical director for large scale corporate events in New York City. So kind of a backwards path of what other people in that field have wanted to do. Right out of college, I was ATing things like Freeze Art Fair and Governor's Ball Music Festival and things on Governor's Island and Randall's Island, and have kind of taken those things and then narrowed my focus into the lighting and video programming. I'd say my biggest advice to just starting out, though, right out of college, is gain an appreciation for what you do not yet know. I know I personally thought I knew everything right out of school, and it definitely created some situations that would probably been easier handled had I been a little more humble in my lack of knowledge.
And I know we've got some people on here that are interested on the theatrical side of things. Jess and Scott, could you speak specifically, or anyone else that went down the theater route, towards what it's like getting started? How often did you go and get coffee for anybody? Anything and everything about that world?
Yeah, I actually have a bit of a strange background in that I came from a small town in Arizona, so I didn't know a lot of people when I moved to New York. So my biggest advice is don't say no to anything, because you don't know what'll come out of it when you first start, but you also have to be highly conscientious of your schedule so you don't overbook, because no one wants you to back out of things. So while you do say yes all the time, make sure you're very aware of when you're saying yes to people. And always listen. It's not always about hearing things. It's about making sure you listen to and really observe the reactions in the room and being aware of how interactions are happening, because you never know when you are going to have a similar conversation, and you always want it to go your way and not their way. So just keep an eye on how conversations happen, not just when conversations are happening.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with just finding people's emails online and sending them messages and saying, hey, let's go get coffee or a drink if you're in town. A lot of these designers and associates live in New York City, but are also out of town 300 days a year. If you're doing a big musical, you'll do the out of town tryout, you'll do the Broadway, you'll do the tour, then you do UK. So that's over the course of 2 years. Maybe you're home for 150 days. So be flexible when reaching out to these people. We're seeing so much more Skype and FaceTime because of we all have to stay home. Don't be afraid to do that either, as long as they're comfortable with it. Especially in theater, there's a lot of older designers and associates who aren't necessarily comfortable with a lot of the technology. So maybe don't push them to do something they're unfamiliar with.
And I think maybe shifting a little bit to the logistics of freelancing, I think there's a lot of things that I discovered pretty early on, and a lot of it through trial and error, and especially looking at the finance side of it. I think a lot of the work that, imagine anyone going out at this point probably has done some freelance work and knows what a 1099 is. But if you're getting paid as a freelancer, you are not having payroll taxes withheld the same way you would at a normal job. So your tax liability is a lot higher, and you need to save a lot of money. You need to technically be making quarterly estimated payments on those taxes that's not being held by your employer. So I got some good advice early on, but it still kind of surprised me how much money I needed to be holding away for taxes. So I got to a point where I was putting anywhere between 30 and 50% of what I would get from a job to save either for taxes and put the rest into savings. And it's really easy to get that first paycheck when you start out as a freelancer, and you get a couple $1,000s to go and buy that couple $1,000 laptop that you've been wanting. But I think getting, like, when you are your own person, you have to have that financial responsibility and discipline. I think that's huge. But then pretty quickly on, as you start to become more successful, looking at ways to get more tax advantageous, and you're probably looking at forming an entity like an LLC. And I say all of this, none of us are licensed CPAs or attorneys or are remotely qualified to give you any advice. And I don't think you will get the answer here, but I'd love to plant the seed as early as possible to know that you should think about maybe becoming an LLC. You should think about maybe hiring a lot of these things. What have you guys here on this panel encountered in being a freelancer or incorporating or any of that kind of admin stuff that it's easy to focus on the art and take all of that for granted?
Well, I think that I don't want anyone to be like scared off by that. Let's back up the world by 2 months. Like there was plenty of work. And so if you wanted to join the industry as a freelancer, you would definitely get work. Now, I think it might take a few months for your calendar to fill up, and you might have to hustle a little bit in the beginning, but if you've got the right attitude and you really work at it and show that you can bring something to the table, you'll definitely be able to pay rent. So I don't want people to be scared off about going into freelancing. But I think what Jackson's getting at a little bit is that there's like a game to it that no one really teaches you, and figuring out how to be the most tax advantageous and figuring out, how to save for things and set up all the admin and the overhead. You don't have to do it. You'll just probably waste money and time. You also don't have to do it right the first time. And I think probably all of us have learned how to set ourselves up from a business administration standpoint by doing it wrong and then taking those lessons forward. So, I don't think that you guys should be scared away from going into freelancing or, scared away from any of this kind of tax stuff, but keep it in mind and definitely, think about it early on so you can get ahead of it.
I think also you need to look at where you want to make your life happen. I moved from Vermont, where there's really no industry to speak of, to San Francisco, where there's a pretty decent industry here for kind of whatever you want to do. I've worked in theaters, I've worked in corporate, experiential, like different installation sort of things, including architecture. And here in California, we have this new law that's passed called AB5. And this is where you really need to be aware of politically what's happening to freelancers, because in California, we've got a completely different set of rules. And it's actually forcing a lot of our freelancers to consider moving out of the state because they don't get the same considerations that they used to. And so if you're interested in living and working in California, you have to be a business. You have to have your own workers' comp, and you have to understand how all of that works together. So look at where you want to live, and make sure that you understand what the rules are where you want to make your life. And that might actually influence where you decide to go, and how you decide to conduct your business.
It's also worth noting, I was a full-time employee of 2 different companies for I think the past 6 years. And I actually very recently, at a very poor time, made a jump to freelance. But it's the freelance lifestyle does give you a lot more freedom. And that was part of my reason for leaving the companies I did, was you, as a company, you're not necessarily getting to pursue your passions. But as a freelancer, I can say, I want to go program shows. I don't want to sit in an office doing paperwork. I just want to do shows. The other thing too is, and several people on this panel have been immensely helpful in having a network of people to ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions about taxing. Or, I asked the first person that I invoiced, I asked, like, how's an invoice supposed to look? Like, what do I send you from my bank account? And, everyone did it the first time at some point. And so it's a lot of other small 1 or 2 person shops or sole proprietor LLCs that are all figuring it out too. And, there are guides on it, but there really aren't. So just ask your friends.
And I will say an accountant is worth every single dime you'll pay for them, especially one who understands how to get the most out of being an entertainment employee.
I would say a good accountant is worth their weight in gold.
Exactly.
I've gone through 6 accountants in my time of being a freelancer, and a bad accountant who does not understand freelancing and does not understand entertainment, and their eyeballs fall out of their head when I'm filing in 23 different states, is probably not the kind of accountant that you want.
It's a great thing to pull your friends on. Like, who in the industry in your area, who do they use, who do they like? Go with that person.
Yeah. Find recommendations, reach out to anyone and everyone. Someone who has an accountant they love will be more than happy to pass that information along. I'm happy with the one that I have now, and I've introduced 4 or 5 people to them since then. Well, I think let's move on. Let's do about a 90-degree pivot here. And I'm sure a lot of people that are either graduating now or in the next year are nervous coming into the industry with the COVID situation. And we had a question saying, what markets can you work in with a theater production degree? Are there any non-entertainment industry jobs you can get? And I think, unfortunately, those two go pretty well together right now. So what do you guys see as the path for this industry? Parallel paths, other jobs where skills might be applicable for 6 months, or what parts of the industry are still going, or do we think are going to come back sooner than other pieces of the industry?
I mean, the buzzword right now is virtual, virtual, virtual. I mean, as we're doing here, I've gotten so many inquiries in the past month of how do we set up a webcast? How do we set up a Zoom meeting? How do we make our virtual meeting better than the other people? And I mean, the same thing applies in a virtual set, whether it's an actual virtual generative set, which I know Berto's on here and will probably chime in on, but also just the how do we make our web conference look good? And, you know, the same thing applies to theater as it does to anything else, just basic lighting, basic sound, basic staging, understanding the layout of the room, understanding what looks good from a camera shot. Like it all cross applies. Those basic skills you learn in a more traditional theater environment still apply.
I think in terms of industries, like when I started college, I didn't know that there was anything I could be as a lighting designer other than on the LORT circuit doing regional theaters. Like if you could do 50 LORT D techs a year, I thought that was the only thing I could do. But there's architectural lighting design, there's corporate shows, there's activations. I've got plenty of friends working at Nautilus that are doing cruise ship lighting projects. And, it takes so long to build a boat or a building that their projects haven't really stopped. I mean, all those guys with longer horizons are definitely still working. So theme park installs, all that kind of stuff, that industry is still chugging along right now.
And actually, I'm still currently working. Our firm is working on a lot of architectural projects, a lot of architainment, which was a phrase that I didn't know existed for a long time. But we're still looking at the future, and there are even corporate clients that are contacting us. They've canceled shows earlier this year, and they're looking at their fall dates and saying, hey, we're going to push forward and start designing this show for the fall, and like getting people together. One of the events that we just did was streaming online. It was supposed to have an audience, and the audience got canceled, but they continued with the event, and it went to an entirely virtual event, which was streaming. And that includes car companies and a lot of things that I didn't know needed lighting per se when I was starting out. My background is actually, I have a degree in anthropology. I was going to go into underwater archaeology. That clearly didn't happen. And my background in theater was I started on stage believing that everything around me was just magic. And I didn't think that there was somebody that had to program all of those lights. And when I found that world, I got sucked into it, clearly. And I love what I do, and I love the community that we have. And those long-term projects are out there, and there are people that are still working on those and still hiring for those. So there are options. So don't narrow yourself into thinking that theater is the only way to go, because there's a lot of work still circulating around and still coming back. The Olympics didn't cancel, they postponed until next year. So there's going to be shows and venues associated with that we're still working on, that it's going to come back. And we can't discount that. We love having these personal connections. We love hanging out with our friends. And that's why the digital side of things has been great. We can reach out to each other this way, but there's still no replacement for being like next to somebody and sharing a room with them. So the live event industry is not dead. It's just taking a break, like a lot of us are.
I also think it's really healthy to start thinking about other fields that you can utilize these skills in that we learn working in this environment. Like you can become a project manager for any sort of industry design. If you're looking to build a product, if you're looking to build all of these things, it's still all of the critical skills that you learn. They're just separate from actually working in theater.
Yeah, the core skills that you learn in theater or really any corner of the entertainment industry is critical thinking in a group, problem solving in a group, designing in a group. And it's a lot of things that it's not like, oh, I know how to program in this one language, but the soft skills that you learn are very valuable. And you are surrounded by other people who are hopefully moderately good at those same things. But when you step outside of the entertainment industry, you really take for granted in what we do that a lot of, especially those personal skills and being able to balance all of this stuff with other human beings, don't exist in a lot of people in a lot of other industries. So there's a lot of value there. And speaking to the kind of roadmap for the future of our industry, or at least the temporary thing, Berto, Kevin, do you guys have any thoughts further on the virtual world or where things are headed or moving, either permanently or temporarily?
Yeah, so like Andy was saying, a lot of people have been wanting to go virtual. I think that's a little broader than just like holding virtual events. I think there already was a lot of stuff that is virtual, right? A lot of stuff exists on the web today and in technology. So I think, you know, if you come from a theater background, you're probably quite good at handling stress. And as like a younger generation, right, you're probably quite good at integrating technology and learning on your own. The internet's amazing, right? So I think if you're not afraid to broaden your skill set and explore other tangential fields, you really won't know where you'll end up. And there's so much out there outside of live events as well. So I used to be a PA for a long time. And before that, I studied biotech, so totally different career entirely. And somehow I ended up here. So now I basically make things pretty. That's my simple way of explaining it. But, you know, it can be for an event. It could be for something that's purely like a web-based thing. It could be a brand video, for instance. So a lot of what we do at All of It now does involve experiences and experiential design, but we're trying to pivot now to take on more work that's just pure motion design, pure graphic design, stuff that already existed in these industries that is happening without necessarily needing a live component, but can be ported over ultimately. So that's where we're seeing a lot of growth right now as people kind of move that money they were going to spend anyway into tangential areas for them to still get the message to their customers or to vendors or, you know, to whoever else they're trying to get in touch with.
I want to say to Chrissy and Kevin's background that you don't need a theater production degree to work in this industry. And the flip side is having a theater production degree doesn't preclude you from any other industry. So especially at this point coming out of school, there's a lot of options. I mean, this is a great industry. It obviously is a little bit of a downturn right now, but it will come back. And this is a great place to build a career, build a life. But if there's something else that's more interesting, then certainly pursue that. There's nothing stopping you.
Never stop learning.
Sorry, I was responding to a question really quick. Yeah, thank you, everyone. That's great. I mean, moving on from here, I think we have a bunch of these questions. Is there anything either on the freelancing side that anyone has any burning thoughts still in their mind? Should we jump into any like software or budgeting, or if anyone listening to this, if you have any questions, please pass them along in the channel. I just got a message from someone that they're not subscribed to YouTube, so YouTube's not letting them comment. So trying to sort that
I'll
out.
say one thing about freelancing, and I think Jackson kind of touched on it a little bit, but there's sort of two things to keep in mind monetarily aside from taxes. One is that there are taxes, so you don't want to spend every dollar. You got to save some for the end of the year, because unlike being an employee somewhere, they don't take the taxes out as you get the money. So picking a number, saving maybe 30 cents of every dollar and putting it in another bank account is great. The other thing is in freelancing, there are ups and downs. So you might be working for 3 months straight, and then you might not be working for an entire month. So you want to be able to take your income and figure out a way to make it last. And there's a lot of different strategies. I just want to pitch my own, which is what I used for the first 3 or 4 years. I had 2 bank accounts, and every dollar I made went into one bank account. And then I paid myself bi-weekly, like I had a full-time job, to the other bank account. So using that was a way that I was able to kind of balance out the ups and downs of freelancing. And I gave myself annual raises, and I did performance reviews, and I let myself earn more over time, but it really helped me stick to a budget in the first few years.
I'll also say that there, especially in the larger markets, are options as far as you can go and work for the union as an overhire. You can supplement your income and you can learn something by going and setting up all of these big shows that come through the major markets. They're always looking for extra hands, and it's not an easy process to get in, but once you get on their list, you can take work as you need it. Don't look at it as like one or the other, because you can do both. You can hold a card and you can travel, or you don't even have to get an entire union card. You can work as an overhire who's technically not a member, but it supplements your income, and you can learn a lot from the people that have been doing that and setting the shows up and doing the physical work. And that's how I transitioned over from laborer to designer. Was I started by setting up shows. I met people that are like, hey, I want to work with you. And I worked my way up from there, because I didn't have a background in education in this. So always look around you and see what your resources are and try to use them to your advantage, because you can find a balance and you can help yourself by doing multiple different things instead of saying, well, this is the one thing that I want to do. That might not be available to you. So what can you do to like help increase your skill set, help increase your hireability, and maybe meet some people that are going to take you to that next level?
And also on that same note, kind of my break in the industry, if you want to call it that, was I made friends with my local lighting shop, which is now a four-wall division, but at the time was independent. And I started just going out doing weekend warrior gigs with them, setting up lights in ballrooms. And suddenly it was, hey, can I program the console? Okay, now I'm the guy that knows how to program the console. Then I got sent up to New York to do one of those gigs, and they saw I could handle working with a local one crew, and then it just kind of cascaded from there. And even listening to the local one guy say, oh yeah, this is how you hang a light, this is how you cable it better, and then watching what they do with lighting. Okay, blue is good, red is bad, or whatever that might be. And just, yeah, as Chrissy said, learning from everyone else around you, and just kind of it cascades once you get in.
Yeah, I think that capacity to learn is huge. And we got an off YouTube question here asking for some more specificity on hiring. I think we made the point that we care more about the personality. We care more about someone that can talk about something other than work, and that's huge. And I mean, for me, when I hire people, that's one of the number one things. But maybe diving a bit deeper in who we've hired recently and like what qualities made us select that person. And I can speak to that. For a production last summer, we hired a bunch of animators that were just coming out of college. It was one of their first shows that they had worked on, and all of them were hungry. They were very enthusiastic. They wanted to learn. They took feedback really well and went back and they iterated. And I think having that desire to learn and that enthusiasm, like some of the initial work that came from, I remember one in particular, the first draft of content, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. But then by the end of the time that we had gone through some iterations with her, and she worked really, really, really hard to make some awesome stuff, the content that came out of that was beautiful. And I thought it had come out of one of the other animators we had that had been doing this for 8 years. And so that to me shows the ability to learn, and again, that enthusiasm. And I think we've hired all of them again, or at least intend to. No, we've hired all of them again. And I don't really have a horror story recently, at least from hiring someone coming out of college. But I think if anyone seems like they don't want to be there or they have a bad attitude, like that's my first red flag. But how about you guys? Have you hired anyone on the younger side of things recently?
We had an intern join us that is now a junior designer with us from Carnegie Mellon. So she came from the kind of theater production, lighting, and projection was her interest. So kind of found us through that, and then made her way out here. But I think the big thing is, you understand that people who are new, who haven't had much work experience, need that opportunity to learn. They're not going to be able to produce at the same rate or quality as someone who's been in the industry for a while, or someone who's done that for longer. So it is an understanding that it is a learning process, and there's a bit of mentoring that goes into it. And I would actually flip it too. You want to seek out a place to go and join where they will give you that kind of mentoring or give you the ability to grow and develop your skills. I think that's
I actually do have a horror story of somebody I hired who was very young, very green, and I still love this person as a person to spend time with and hang out with, but I'd be hesitant to hire them again. I think it's purely because they didn't appreciate their lack of experience or lack of knowledge, and all they wanted to do was push buttons at an EDM show, and like never actually put the time in to push a case, hang a light, run a cable. Like, so don't worry about putting the time. No one is above pushing cases. I still do it daily.
And I think that, nobody gives you the keys to the Ferrari on day one. And in general, in this industry, there's like a little bit of a catch-22 problem, which is like before you program, like nobody wants to hire you to go program a concert tour if you've never programmed a concert tour before. So how do you build relationships where someone's going to trust you and say, all right, I'm going to take a chance on you? Part of that is, again, building those relationships and working down market and pushing cases and, talking to someone and showing that you're interested. And the other part of that is taking a risk on yourself. And at some point in this industry, you got to jump into the deep end. And unfortunately, it's a little sink or swim. I think a lot of people end up figuring out how to tread water very quickly, but you're going to fail on a few gigs in the beginning, and that's okay. But yeah, so don't be afraid of failure. But I think those are the two ways that you can kind of get into this world.
Go ahead.
Okay, there are two viewers who are coming back to join our team this summer. One is an intern and one is a staff member, and I'm so thrilled that they're coming back, because when I hear those names come up, I say, yes, I get to work with this person again. So remember that when you're young and you're coming up in this industry, learning from the people around you, trusting the people around you, and then making your own name, that's what's going to carry with you for your entire career. If you've got a good reputation attached to your name, then it's going to go a really long way. That's really at the end of the day, that's all any of us have in this industry, is our name and our reputation that's attached to it. So it doesn't mean that you can't make mistakes and learn from failure, but you have to be able to come back in a way that you can learn from those and keep moving forward. And I'm just so thrilled when I see people that are younger coming up, where I'm like, oh, we're going to be working for you guys someday. This is great. And I love that. That's sort of the cycle of production life, is that one day one person's in charge, the next day somebody else is in charge, and there's an ebb and a flow to it. So I'm thrilled when I see young people coming up with the right attitude and approach to say, like, I'm here to learn and I'm pushing myself, and that to me is worth everything.
And on that, yeah, don't be afraid to learn, but also too, within the, the general recurring theme on this has been be a fun person to be, not even a fun person, but be a not terrible human to be around. And also don't be above any job. And also, when not being above any job, try to understand the other departments and why they're doing what they do. I've witnessed, lighting programmers throw hissy fits because their console's not set up when the truss isn't even in the air yet. And, even if it's a matter of, hey, I want to help, can I push my console to front of house, or can I help run the snake? Or even like I was doing a show where there was no video and the audio department was struggling. And I'm like, hey, want me to go get you guys Starbucks across the street? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. That would be fantastic. Like, just learn to help wherever it may be. And that's may not necessarily be your department, or even, I'm a closet audio guy, as most of these people on this panel know. Like, we had a show get canceled. My front of house was packed up. I helped tear down the line arrays, and now I know how to fly an L Acoustics PA. So you help another department, but you can also learn what they have to do every day. And it gave me a better understanding of, why the PA takes so long to fly, or why the stage takes so long to push, or any of those things.
Yeah, always looking back to being an audio guy.
I think that's a huge point, is being a team player. And if someone else is struggling and you go help them out, that means that they are going to come help you out when you are struggling. And the amount of times that I've been bailed out by someone in some other department when shit hits the fan is huge. And like one of the first shows I did, I think I was still in school at the time. It was this small corporate show. I think the video was a team of 2 and the lighting was a team of 3 or 4 people. And the client came in at 6 p.m. and loved everything, and came in at 10 p.m. and hated everything. And the lighting, like we were able to kind of realign on the video stuff in a couple hours, but the lighting team was like, oh crap, like let's go back to the shop. put literally anything we can get on the truck and just put lights anywhere we can because they wanted more lighting. And I wasn't getting paid for it, but I stayed until the sun came up and like made really good friends. And that leads to your reputation in the industry. And maybe you don't want a reputation of someone who moonlights as a lighting guy and anyone comes to expect that if you're a video person or vice versa. But just having a reputation of being a friendly person, even outside of someone that can give you a job, is huge, because you never know when that person is having drinks with someone who can give you a job and can put in a good word for you. Because anytime that I'm trying to hire someone and I don't know them, I go and say like, who do we mutually know on Facebook, or who do we know on Instagram or LinkedIn? How can I find one mutual friend? And then I go to that one mutual friend and say, how is this person? And if that one mutual friend says, nah, they're a jerk, don't hire them, I probably am not going to hire them. And that one mutual friend could be so tangentially departed from you and what you do. So don't burn any bridges, don't make any enemies. And I think going back to one of Charles's points about, I think taking risks, being part of being a freelancer is being uncomfortable some of the time and taking risks. And I always say that if some part of what you're doing doesn't scare you at least a little bit, then you're probably not reaching far enough. Like I've built my career on fake it till you make it. And I can't wait to actually make it one of these days, because I worked on Mariah Carey several years ago. I was a video department of one, and they said, can you projection map some automated scenery with very little automation data? And you've done this before? Or no, sorry, can you do this? Yes. The question to have you done this before was no, but I figured it out and like totally dived down the deep end, and it was fine. And sometimes you're going to fail, but being able to take those risks, I think is huge.
Also, going back to the do we have mutual friends? Do we have, anyone in common? That's also, even though I'm not an audio department or I'm not an automation department, I've definitely gotten things from those departments that I necessarily shouldn't have necessarily gotten, or have had them want to help me by just being a friendly human, being like, hey, I know you guys are busy, but can you make my automation data in meters, not feet? That will save me a lot of work down the line. Like things that they don't necessarily have to do, but if you're not a jerk, they probably will. And that's, even departmental wise, like having people, those reputations precede you. People have said, oh, I've heard about you, you're good.
One of my corporate shows at the end of last fall, I was distinctly remembering laying down on the carpet with the client, picking up pieces of lint and rubbing out one small piece of carpet with a Tide pen because there was a slight stain on it. And it's not my job, but going above and beyond is like, I see that you guys need help, and I'm here, and I might as well jump in and do something so I can feel useful. I can feel like I'm contributing, not just standing there and being like, well, my job is done. Just willingness to do anything and go above and beyond will get you noticed for sure.
And I think to pivot here to a good question coming in from the chat, there's a lot of talk around sustainability and work-life balance happening these days. And with that in mind, what should entrants into this field expect as far as hours and workload? And I think I'd start that off with one of the best pieces of advice that anyone ever gave me when I first told them I wanted to go into theater. They're a scenic designer, and said, all right, if you're going to do this, like, get ready. You're going to miss weddings. You're going to miss funerals. You're going to miss holidays. And the people in your life are not going to understand. Now, it's not as fatalistic as that advice, but if you at least start from there, it only gets better. But it's definitely something to consider. And I'll leave it up to anyone who wants to jump in on that question.
Part of that's lifestyle choice. I mean, there's this is an industry like any others, and while there are sort of direct production in the field roles, there's also people that are doing architectural lighting, and they're in the office 9 to 5, and they have very normal schedules. There's people in larger companies that do have 9 to 5 jobs, and they might go on site maybe a few weeks a year or something like that. There's even trade magazines. There's LDI, so you could work on putting on LDI, or work at a manufacturer in support or something like that. So there's definitely 9 to 5 jobs in this industry if you want it. The core of this industry, though, at least on the entertainment side, is nights and weekends. So you'll definitely work a lot of nights and weekends. And the days are typically long because if someone's renting a venue and you're actually in production, putting on a show, rehearsing a show, they want to maximize the time that they're there. So for me, a standard day, like a minimum day, is 10 hours. We usually start at 8 in the morning, and with the 1 hour lunch break, it's 8 to 7. That's most of my days. But there's plenty of overtime when there's rehearsals going on. I'd say personally, I don't mind it so much because most of my work is out of town. So if I'm already being paid to be in another city, I sort of don't mind working. But the flip side of that is you don't work every week, or at least you don't have to work every week. So I think the total hours worked throughout the year might be pretty comparable to a 9-to-5 job. But you might not always get those hours at the same time as other people. You might have a whole week off. You might, fly out the next weekend. So that can definitely affect who you can see. And I found over time, my social circle has really just become people that are understanding of the schedule. They're not all entertainment people, but they're people that can be sympathetic to the fact that I might not be in town for a month or 2 months, and then they're happy to see me when I get back.
But also on the flip side of that too, as you're saying, you're not necessarily, you have more time off as a freelancer. Like I had the majority of my fiance's college break off, which was nice, which if I was working a 9-to-5, I'd be in the office every day. But so then it's kind of picking and choosing when you want to be home. I mean, there are guys and girls out that are touring full time, that are gone and on the road 11 months a year, and yeah, they're making a lot of money, but they're sacrificing, home and social and all that, and that happens with, I've personally found myself that with age, I started off being that guy and then realized more and more that I wanted a house and some cats and, a long-term relationship and all that. And so it's you can have both, and you can start off doing one and merge to the other, or go become a company person, or, there's many different paths you can go.
This is actually the first time that I've ever had a 9-to-5 job. 10 to 6. But I'm kind of adjusting to that and figuring out like how to keep track of hours and keep track of vacation days or sick days and things like that. Because I came from the world where I did miss weddings and I did miss funerals, but I also got to go take a month and go to Thailand, or take a month and go to Europe. And I didn't have anybody else to report to. And so the adjustment is pretty sizable to go from having that kind of freedom to really having to track those hours and to be on the same schedule as everybody else. But for me, the trade-off is getting to learn from these other people while I'm on the job. And I think that it's all worth it. And it really just depends on which direction you want to go in and what you value. And it doesn't mean that you're locked into that forever. It means that you have the option to be more hireable in the future if you take a job and you stick with it. And even if you feel like you're in over your head sometimes, I think that it's valuable. And I think that either way you look at it, it's just a trade-off, and you have to weigh what's important to you. Is the regular schedule important, or is having that freedom important? And that will change throughout your life. You're never going to be locked into one thing. Having a skill set like the ones that like all of the people in this panel have, you could go anywhere and do anything, which I think is the most rewarding part of being a part of this industry.
And I think a big part of it too is the quality of that time off that you get. And when I took a 9-to-5 job for a year and a half, and then discovered that it was not the right thing for me, and pulled the ripcord and jumped out. But a big part of coming back to the freelance world was I wanted to make sure that I was getting more time off on a weirder schedule than I was at a 9-to-5. So for the last 4.5 years, I have tracked what I have done every single day loosely. And I've put more weight on like true vacation days and like normal weight on a day where I'm not doing any work. And I've also counted half days. And at a 9-to-5, you get 33% of the year of quality time not working. In the last 4.5 years, I'm currently at 55% quality time. I've had some days where I've worked my ass off for 16, 18 hours, but I've had more time relaxing and doing fun stuff. And that's certainly not everyone's experience. And I probably worked a lot harder when I first got into the industry. But it's a different kind of work schedule. Like expect to put in long hours, but I'd rather put in a week of 14-hour days and then have a week and a half off than just go to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
And one thing,
Speaking, or sorry, go on.
for it.
Speaking to that work-life balance, I think it's important to take care of yourself. That's a big one that I think is easy to forget. Like if you're traveling a lot or you're going on site a lot, just remember to, try and eat well. Try and spend time, getting some exercise or getting some sunlight, which is super important. Or, if you don't get enough sunlight, make sure you stack up on your vitamin D and all that. But in general, just remember to know your limits. There's probably always going to be a temptation to take on more work just to have it because you don't know, for instance, right now, like when your next gig will be. So, just make sure that you set aside time to be you and do your hobbies and get time off and see your friends and family and all that. Like it can be difficult, but I think it's important to make that as big of a priority as everything else that you do.
Can I put that to everyone on the panel? What is the biggest either temptation or mental health struggle or challenge that you encounter, but also what's the most important thing that you do for your mental health? And I'd maybe ask Hank to talk about pastries on tour, because I think that's an entertaining
Oh,
story.
I was about to talk about the cookie table, yeah. Because I mean, especially on a lot of these on-site jobs, like when you're out on tour. I was on a tour recently where there was a dedicated pastry chef in catering, which like is absurd. That's an absurd thing. And I didn't look so hot afterwards. But then I, took some time off and went skiing and like did outdoorsy things. So it's all part of that balance. But yeah, definitely like my number one thing when I'm on the road is to like find your day off friend and, figure out who you're going to go on like a long walk with and like, someone who will help you like, hey, I'm having a really rough day. They're there to help you out. They're having a rough day. They're there to help you out. Because like, again, as we said first thing in this panel, it's mostly about the people you're with. And especially when you're new to the industry or new to like a camp, it's important to like find that friend to lean on.
I think working the hours that we do, it's really easy to really put off understanding yourself and your own reactions to things. And so something I learned really early on is I'm a solar powered human and I need sunlight and vitamin D in order to be a happy person. And I think that like knowing those weird things about yourself, that if you need to go outside for the 10-minute break just to like soak up some vitamin D and you're much better through the rest of the day, go do that. Like take the time to do the 10-minute thing that you need to do in order to be a happier person.
I love that as you were saying that, it looked like Andy walked out. Sorry.
Yeah, he's like, nope, sunlight.
I'm out. Which
I need a coffee.
Jess's thing is spending time outside. My thing is maybe I'm going to take 10 minutes and just take my headset off and get away from everyone. I've got someone in my ear for 12 hours a day. I'm over it. I need 10 minutes. Stop talking to me. I'm going to check Instagram. And that's my 10-minute thing.
I try to maximize my days off and my outdoor time. I have a lot of outside hobbies that I love to do. I love riding my bike. Before this conference call, I went rollerblading. Mostly I go skiing, and having something that is like a full day where that's the only thing I'm focused on is like getting down the mountain as fast as I can through as many awesome trees as I can find is my version of Zen. And having that separation be like, I'm not necessarily going to be connected all day and dealing with, the questions that are inevitably rolling in on shows that are coming up, and just cherishing that time that I have. I also don't keep my phone with me at night. So for several years now, I've left my phone downstairs. So when I go to bed, it's like I'm totally unplugging. And I think that we all need to find ways to disconnect in a way that we can come back. And when we have to be attached to our computers or attached to our phones, or working in production, just grueling hours, that you have that time to yourself and you can really focus inward and be relaxed and be like, they can wait. The questions, the Slack messages, the emails can wait until the next morning, when you come downstairs and you have your cup of coffee. So having that balance is important, but it's always an ever-changing thing, because sometimes you don't have the days to go skiing. Sometimes we're not allowed to go skiing anymore. So you have to find ways to get creative and find what feeds you. That's not work.
Personally, I like the idea of getting away from your phone is incredible. Like a couple times a year, I love to go camping for 1 or 2 days or go hiking for a few hours. And personally, living in Las Vegas out in the desert, there are places I could go where I can't get cell phone access even if I try. And it is a great thing to have at my disposal. And that's only a couple times a year. Personally, I find the morning coffee routine is amazing. You get up a little bit early, you make yourself a nice pot of coffee, you hang out, you chill, you don't watch TV, you don't listen to anything, you don't talk to people, you just sit for at least 10 minutes with no interruption, drinking a cup of coffee. And it's a great way to just find your morning zen before you just dive into the thick of all of the BS that you're gonna have to deal with that day.
Well, and even too, I've been using my, I as a product of the millennium, like have my phone on me at all times. But even just turning on the do not disturb mode at night, like when I'm home, like yeah, my phone's on me and I can check it if I want to, but I'm not feeling a buzz in my pocket or in my hearing it on the table. Like I refuse to wear a smartwatch for the same reason. Like nothing, knowing what is actually important in that regard. But also at the end of the day, we do, the majority of us do shows. We're not life and death. We want to think we are sometimes, and we want to be a martyr, and we want to, think that it's the most important thing in the world. But at the end of the day, we make entertainment. Like nothing we do is that important that, you can't let it, wait for 20 minutes or something like that, especially when home, on site during the show. Yeah, a little bit more, but like sitting at home, I don't need to be answering emails about pixel counts for a show 3 months from now at 8 p.m.
It's all about setting boundaries is kind of the theme that I hear. I mean, I come from a slightly different side. I have gone on site a lot. I mean, these days I work in the office mostly 9 to 6, 5 days a week. And it's funny when you work with people in corporate culture because everybody is kind of on that schedule. But some people are workaholics. Some people work nonstop at night on weekends, and you'll have clients like that. And I think one of the most important things I've learned is to set those boundaries so that it doesn't become an expectation. Because if you start replying just even a little bit later each day, or like 1 or 2 emails on the weekend or something like that, then it starts to become expected of you. And it's very hard to go back once that door is opened. So I think a big thing is setting those boundaries for yourself and being consistent with them. Like, unless it's a huge emergency or something, right? I think people are generally understanding that you should have time off.
But that's also the other thing that I've ran into working, especially the bigger national shows, being on the East Coast, where I actually feel like I'm best coast. Sorry to all the California people out here, but I have London's awake during some of my hours and California's awake during some of my hours. So it's good and bad that in the morning I can still catch London if I need to, namely working with someone like Disguise, who's UK based. But also on the flip side of that, I have my primary clients in California right now. So even though I don't really want to, I might be taking a conference call at 7 p.m. my time because that's mid-afternoon for them.
It's a good point.
That's
Time zones are hard.
Central time is where it's at. You've got a good balance between you coastal people. You're tacked on to Europe, and you can still talk to people in Asia. But we've got about 7 minutes left. I'd like to put one more question to the group, and then if anyone has any last questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. But one question that I've gotten a couple times from some students is, in this downtime, what skills should they be looking at building? What software should they be learning? So if we want to just run around really quick and say either software that you use on a daily basis that is worth learning, or any resources out there. I know a lot of software is either free or like Notch is doing the PLE, if anyone wants to talk about that. And then maybe do a quick reminder for, if they weren't here at the beginning, what industry you work in. So again, as a concert designer, I do a lot in Cinema 4D or any similar 3D rendering program. And knowing lighting consoles is huge. There's a lot of videos out there for the M8 III that's worth going through those tutorials. And Vectorworks, I do a lot in. So those would be my big three working in concerts.
I would say in general, I work in concerts doing video, but networking is something that more and more is becoming the backbone of every show. And so if you can go and like Dante has some really good networking stuff on their online videos. But even if you want to take a deep dive and look at like the Cisco small business switches, which just show up a lot, like the more you can troubleshoot networking problems, the more you will be invaluable as like a little side to like your normal skill set.
I think those core skills, you'll figure it out. It's kind of obvious what they are. If you want to do lighting, you're going to learn how to program an MA. But I think all those ancillary skills are very important, and they kind of are make a big difference in terms of what kind of jobs you can do, and what, if someone's going to call a propeller head, they're going to call Hank, right? Because they know he knows networking. So learning networking is great. One of my regrets was not taking a computer science class in school. I think that that's only becoming more and more important to what we do. And that thought process and way of thinking about a problem is also important. So even the meta of it is great. And I think new technologies that are coming out, a lot of stuff is happening in Unreal now. So maybe learning more about game engines would be a good place to start as well.
Also on the game engine front, I said something about this. I don't know if it's actually online. I gave a talk at Disguise about this. Learn a programming language. The MA uses Lua. Some other platforms use Lua. Touch Designer and D3, Disguise use Python. Even just knowing rudimentary knowledge of any of those generally translates pretty well between languages, but knowing enough Lua to be dangerous has definitely gotten me out of some binds. Ditto with Python. To echo on Hank, networking, Notch, Disguise, both have free things right now, but also as the resident audio guy, learn some form of audio, Pro Tools, Reaper, any of those have definitely just basic knowledge of those have gotten me out of a bind as well. Reaper's free trial. I think Pro Tools has a light version now, but just basic knowledge of those is super helpful.
I mean, I'm probably the odd one out here in that I do a lot more animation and motion design. I think what's indispensable is kind of the Adobe suite and understanding Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, Premiere, Media Encoder. Like that whole suite of tools is extremely useful because there's more and more video on shows and events and just everything in general. Everything's got to move now. I think a problem that I actually struggle with a lot is there's so many tools to learn. Which ones do you pick? Like for any task you're trying to get done, there's probably 5 different ways of doing it that are all equally correct. So at some point too, as you explore tools, I think a lot of it is finding just which tools you like more, doing like a quick dive into individual tools and just getting a really broad strokes, shallow feel for these tools might help you make some of those decisions. And then picking 1 or 2 that you go really deep with, I think is also essential. So, shallow exploration, but then really deep dives. So at our agency, we use a lot of Notch for real-time motion design, a lot of D3 and Disguise for doing shows and previs. We're looking at Unreal now, like Charles was saying, a lot of people are really interested in real-time game design. I think a core thing in general that I see now is 3D. Understanding 3D and how to work with 3D is really essential, whether you're drafting, whether you're animating or compositing. And then just understanding how industries work, that can be really different than how a tool might look on the surface. Like there are very, very ingrained industry workflows sometimes that are hard to disrupt because so many people already do it, that there's just momentum there. So there's a balance of which tool you like to use, and then also which tool that the industry wants you to use that you're going to get hired to do. So don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah,
we're doing so much architectural stuff, and that has to do with these really large theme parks, and the models for those are really big. One of the programs that I didn't realize would really feed into lighting design so much is Revit. And that's a building information management software where you have these incredibly big files, and the lighting equipment needs to be built as a family to be inserted into the file. So it can carry all of the same information that we get from things like AutoCAD or from Vectorworks. So knowing something like that, and especially with a theatrical background, is actually extremely helpful if you're at all interested in doing something that's architectural lighting design or thematic lighting design. We are desperate for people that know Revit better, which is a really hireable skill, which I think is totally fascinating because I'm now having to really do a deep dive into that and start to learn that program because I never knew I needed to know it.
Well, and also in that regard too, knowing what industry or what part of the industry you want to potentially work in, like you said, the more theme park and architectural is Autodesk based. However, the theater side of it's Vectorworks based, or like same thing with 3D packages. A lot of people are using Cinema 4D. I personally prefer 3D Studio because it thinks better in my mind. But knowing what your peers are using, because not only can you have a network of help then, but you also have cross compatibility with files, as anyone who's ever worked in 3D knows, it can be miserable.
Jess and Scott, you guys want to talk on anything in the theater world before we wrap up?
I'm going to throw out FileMaker because it is a little quiet hitter that can talk to a lot of other programs and not in ways that are always expected. So start learning how to make relational databases work for you instead of you working for them.
Sounds like a good title of a book for you to author. Yeah, actually, that's a fantastic point, and that being good at FileMaker is so applicable in so many different things, and especially if you're trying to get in as an intern or assistant level. If someone came to me wanting to work on a show and was like, "Look at this really bomb-ass thing I made in FileMaker," they rocket up that list. I mean, is Lightwrite still a thing in theater? It's been a while.
Unfortunately.
And we are dying for the next one. Sorry if anyone is friends with anyone who might be involved with that program, but we would love a slicker, more 2020 friendly version of that program.
Perhaps in FileMaker?
Perhaps in FileMaker.
Yeah, and Lightwrite is still super, super useful for all of the people who are doing corporate events. If you're on the production electrician side, I've definitely had to prep some shows and export all that information from Vectorworks into Lightwrite. It's sort of the only game for doing what we need as far as printing labels and making truss tapes go. So yeah, Lightwrite.
Awesome. All right. Well, does anyone have any other salient last things to throw in before we wrap up?
You're gonna get me ranting on FileMaker real quick. The only thing with there's a lot of apps. FileMaker is one of them. Touch Designer is my other one. Be able to step back and look at the tool you're using and ask, is it the right tool for the job? I've seen some absolutely insane things built in FileMaker that, with 30 seconds of Googling, I found a package that does exactly what this person just spent, a month or a week building in FileMaker. So investigate your tools before you dive deep. And I've been guilty of it too, as is probably everyone on this group, of building something ridiculous and then realizing that I could have bought a freeware utility for $10 on the App Store to do it.
Sometimes the easiest way to communicate an idea is a napkin. You don't always have to use Cinema 4D, Vectorworks, or anything else. It's like, here's a quick napkin sketch. Don't be afraid to do that. And it's cheap.
Well, I think that's some good wisdom to end on. Thank you, everyone that has joined us and watching this, and thank you to all of you that have joined the panel. I'm sure everyone watching appreciates your time, and feel free to pass this along to any other classes or any other college students out there that this might be useful for. Or if you have any other things, we might put together more specific panels. I know there's a question about women in entertainment. I think that would make a great panel. Vectorworks, doing a deeper dive into that. If there's anything else you're interested in, let us know, and we're all bored and we're happy to talk. So on that, we'll wrap it up. Again, thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
You all.
Meow.